Section 26. The concept of God falsified. The concept of morality falsified. But even here Jewish priestcraft did not stop. The whole history of Israel ceased to be of any value. Out with it! These priests accomplished that miracle of falsification, of which a great part of the Bible is the documentary evidence, with a degree of contempt unparalleled, and in the face of all tradition and all historical reality, they translated the past of their people into religious terms, which is to say, they converted it into an idiotic mechanism of salvation, whereby all offenses against Yahweh were punished, and all devotion to him was rewarded. We would regard this act of historical falsification as something far more shameful if familiarity with the ecclesiastical interpretation of history for thousands of years had not blunted our inclinations for uprightness in historicis. And the philosophers support the Church. The lie about a moral order of the world runs through the whole of philosophy, even the newest. What is the meaning of a moral order of the world? That there is a thing called the will of God, which once and for all time determines what man ought to do and what he ought not to do. That the worth of a people, or of an individual thereof, is to be measured by the extent to which they or he obey this will of God. That the destinies of a people or of an individual are controlled by this will of God, which rewards or punishes according to the degree of obedience manifested. In place of all that pitiful lie, reality has this to say: the priest, a parasitical variety of man, who can exist only at the cost of every sound view of life, takes the name of God in vain. He calls that state of human society in which he himself determines the value of all things the kingdom of God. He calls the means whereby that state of affairs is attained the will of God. With cold-blooded cynicism he estimates all people, all ages, and all individuals by the extent of their subservience or opposition to the power of the priestly order. One observes him at work. Under the hand of the Jewish priesthood the great age of Israel became an age of decline. The exile, with its long series of misfortunes, was transformed into a punishment for that great age, during which priests had not yet come into existence. Out of the powerful and wholly free heroes of Israel's history they fashioned, according to their changing needs, either wretched bigots and hypocrites, or men entirely godless. They reduced every great event to the idiotic formula, obedient or disobedient to God. They went a step further. The will of God, in other words, some means necessary for preserving the power of the priests, had to be determined, and to this end they had to have a revelation. In plain English, a gigantic literary fraud had to be perpetrated, and holy scriptures had to be concocted. And so, with utmost hierarchical pomp, and days of penance and much lamentation over the long days of sin now ended, they were duly published. The will of God, it appears, had long stood like a rock. The trouble was that mankind had neglected the Holy Scriptures. But the will of God had already been revealed to Moses. What happened? Simply this: the priest had formulated, once and for all time, and with the strictest meticulousness, what tithes were to be paid to him, from the largest to the smallest, not forgetting the most appetizing cuts of meat, for the priest is a great consumer of beefsteaks. In brief, he let it be known just what he wanted, what the will of God was. From this time forward, things were so arranged that the priest became indispensable everywhere, at all the great natural events of life, at birth, at marriage, in sickness, at death, not to say at the sacrifice, that is, at meal-times. The holy parasite put in his appearance, and proceeded to denaturize it, in his own phrase, to sanctify it. For this should be noted, that every natural habit, every natural institution, the state, the administration of justice, marriage, the care of the sick and of the poor, everything demanded by the life instinct, in short, everything that has any value in itself, is reduced to absolute worthlessness, and even made the reverse of valuable by the parasitism of priests, or, if you choose, by the moral order of the world. The fact requires a sanction. A power to grant values becomes necessary, and the only way it can create such values is by denying nature. The priest depreciates and desecrates nature. It is only at this price that he can exist at all. Disobedience to God, which actually means to the priest, to the law, now gets the name of sin. The means prescribed for reconciliation with God are, of course, precisely the means which bring one most effectively under the thumb of the priest. He alone can save. Psychologically considered, sins are indispensable to every society organized on an ecclesiastical basis. They are the only reliable weapons of power. The priest lives upon sins. It is necessary to him that there be sinning. Prime axiom: God forgiveth him that repenteth. In plain English, him that submitteth to the priest. End of sections 20 through 26.